Stop. Talk to me.
All right, Crystal Page, how are you?
I'm wonderful, Grant Oliphant. How are you?
I'm good. We just did an interview with Jay Buys, a principal at a firm called Visceral, which, important for our conversation, is a firm that works in the purpose-driven enterprise space. They're
Yes.
a B Corp. And so the big idea here is San Diego as a hub for a different way of thinking about business and the enterprise of capitalism.
Right. And I'm familiar with Jay because he was on the board of Business for Good.
Mm-hmm.
And just for anyone who maybe didn't hear it the first time, B Corp is short for B Corporation. So these are corporations that go through major certifications to do good by their community and further their mission.
And they focus on profit, obviously, but as we'll talk about, they also focus on people and the planet. So they're really trying to think about the broad good, even as they're trying to do well.
Shall we dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Jay Buys, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
You know, this is a conversation that I've been looking forward to, partly because you and I were part of a larger conversation talking about sort of communications trends in San Diego and themes that are important to the future of philanthropy and this community. And it was interesting because you're in a, you're a head of an agency. You would not be the guy I would naturally assume would be deep into a conversation about community good. And it's precisely because you care from a business perspective about community and social good. So we're going to be exploring that today and why that matters and why you think it's an opportunity for San Diego. But let's start with just who you are and what you do. So you're the founder and head of a company called Visceral.
Correct.
And what does it do?
So we are a B Corp certified creative agency.
Okay.
So we build brands and websites exclusively for social change organizations. So we work with nonprofits, foundations, academia, anyone who's trying to make the world a better place. We're trying to help them leverage modern technology to do so.
Okay, and you just used a phrase that I think needs to be teased apart, B Corp certified.
Yeah.
Explain what that is.
So B Corp certification is sort of a rigorous process for businesses that sort of share the values of the nonprofit community.
Mm-hmm.
So, traditional businesses focus pretty much only on their profit margin, only on the bottom line. But for the B Corp community, we focus on what we call the triple bottom line. So people, profit, and planet. So it's basically a framework for running a socially responsible business, a business that gives back, a business that gets involved. And we're big believers that business can and should be a force for positive change in the world.
Yeah. So tell me why you made that decision. I get that it's consistent with the focus of your organization, which is on, as you said, organizations that are trying to change the world for the better. But aside from a marketing play, why does it make sense to do something like that?
If I'm being fully transparent, we kind of stumbled into the B Corp movement.
Yeah.
We didn't set out to be a B Corp. We didn't even know B Corp existed. We were founded in 2006, which coincidentally is the same year that the B Corp movement was founded, but we didn't have any idea.
I didn't know. Yeah, interesting.
We just founded Visceral because we wanted a little bit more autonomy over our lives. My business partner and I, we were working for a huge agency in Washington, D.C., and we were much younger back then. And on one hand, it was sort of a dream job. We were working for this big company, in our nation's capital, and we met a lot of really great people doing it. But the big agency world is, one, grueling, 70, 80-hour weeks a lot of the time, weekends spent in the office. At one point I lost count of how many, nights I had to sleep in the office to get the work done.
Really? Wow.
And two, the type of clients that we worked with. on a good day, it was sort of innocuous. We built things for AT&T to sell ringtones. If anyone's old enough to remember those. And on a bad day, we worked on some stuff that was morally questionable, and we didn't really like that kind of work. So we founded Visceral just because we wanted to build a better company. We didn't really know what that would be, or even how to do it. I don't have a business background. We just knew how to build websites. But about 9-10 years in, we had a client who sent us an email that said, "Hey, can you put this logo on our website and link it to this press release that we wrote?" And we're like, "Yeah, sure." And I was like, "I don't know what this is." And so I read the press release, and I was like, "Oh my God, like that's what we want to be." It laid out a framework for everything that we were trying to do, but didn't really know how to articulate, didn't really know the processes for. And, once we sort of learned about it, we were all in. We were like, that's who we want to be. And now 10 years in, this year is the 10th year we've been a B Corp. It's enormous benefits to our business, but also to our mental health, just being able to sleep better at night because of the work that we do and our involvement in our community and all the things that go along with that.
So what had to change when you went through that process? What did it mean for you in terms of governance and hiring and decision making and sleeping at night?
Yeah.
What did you have to go through?
So it is a pretty rigorous process. It's not just a pay a fee and get a sticker kind of program, which is what I like about it. If you see that logo on a product or on a company's website, that they've been sort of put through the ringer. And so for us, it was the first time we did it. It was about a 9-month process where they reviewed everything that we did as a business and helpfully gave us feedback on some of the things that we could do. So I'll give you an example. At the time, they were like, "Okay, give us your employee handbook." And I was like, "Great, here's this $20 PDF that I paid for," because we were sort of in our infancy. We didn't really know any better. And they looked at all of our policies and they gave us very specific feedback. We're like, "Well, here's how you can sort of earn some points by adding a better maternity leave policy." And that's something that we just hadn't really given much thought to because not that we didn't care. It's just we hadn't, as a small business owner, like you sort of tackle the problems as they come, and we didn't have anyone on our team who had had a baby yet, and so we just didn't pay it much attention. And so they kind of walked us through this process. We're like, "Here's what you can do to change some of your policies so they'll be better for your team. Here's what you can do to get better for your environmental impact, better for your community, et cetera, et cetera." And so they really just carved out a framework for us, which made it easy to do all the things that we wanted to do, but didn't really know how or have the experience to do.
So, profit, but also people and planet. We are or have been living for a while through an era where the defining essence of capitalism is make as much money as you possibly can. And some people might think of business for good as either a contradiction or a nice marketing ploy. So when you talk to people about why this is real and why it represents a new path, how do you make that case?
So given the work that we do at Visceral, like working with the nonprofit community, nonprofits are wonderful. We have some amazing clients, and I've met some of the best people in the world that work at nonprofits. And, they are tackling some of the big issues of our time. But some of the challenges that nonprofits have is that they're spending a lot of their time and money trying to get time and money so that they can focus on their cause. Where we view it as a B Corp has a sustainable business model. Profit's not the thing that we're mad at, it's greed, right? So if you make a bunch of money and you use that money to pay your staff livable wages and provide, healthcare benefits and retirement plans, and use that money to give back and get involved in your community, well, that's a good thing. Like money is a means to an end.
Love that, right.
And so if we can, build a more sustainable model to make progress on some of the issues we care about, I think that's where, my heart is.
Yeah. So profit is not the enemy; it's greed. Like
Absolutely.
You said. So when you think about the business for good community, well, let's define that for a moment. So
Okay.
what is the business for good community?
It depends. So here in San Diego, we actually have an organization called Business for Good San Diego, which is a local nonprofit that pushes for progressive policy.
Right.
And sort of under the guise that, small business owners, which make up the, most of employment here in San Diego County, that those people should have a seat at the table where policy decisions are made. And we can push for policy that makes our community better, that benefits all of the residents of San Diego. But larger than that, Business for Good in general, I think involves, organizations like that, but the B Corp community, organizations like Conscious Capitalism here locally, Cause San Diego, and Be Local, which is our B Corp chapter here in San Diego. It's sort of anyone who views business as a force for good and a force for change, and a lever that we can pull on to make a positive impact.
When you articulate for folks what the distinction is between a company that is really committed to business for good as opposed to one that's just adopted that as a marketing position, how do you help them understand what's really different?
Yeah, for me, it comes down to what people do versus what they say. Because it is, a friend of mine introduced me to a term the other day called purpose washing, similar to greenwashing, which is kind of what you're suggesting, that there are companies that are marketing themselves as purpose-driven or better for the environment, whatever. And it's fake. It's marketing. It looks good and it sounds good, but there's no teeth behind it. And so it's one of the reasons why I like the B Corp community specifically, because there is a certification process, there is accountability, and it's not something that you can easily join. You do have to go through an intense and rigorous process to sort of prove what you're doing, and they measure all different aspects of what you do, from your governance to your sustainability to how you treat your employees, how you show up for your community, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's sort of a proof point. So when you see that logo, you know that business has been put through the ringer, and that you can trust that they're a place where you can spend your money and feel confident about it.
Have there been moments where or when living your values has cost you?
Yeah, all the time.
So can you, tell us about a couple of them. What's what are the sort of choices that come up for you?
It's funny. I wrote we're coming up on March, which is B Corp month. And every year I try to write a blog post or something to kind of talk about it. And a couple years ago I wrote one that I think is probably the most popular thing I've ever written. And I titled it, "Being a B Corp Sucks." And I love it because that's the honest truth. Like it's hard. And so for a practical example, as a small business, there's less than 50 employees in the state of California, I'm not legally required to provide my team with health insurance. I think it's a good idea that people have health insurance. I'm also one of these crazy people that believes that maybe our taxpayer dollars should fund things like in health insurance and education, but that's unfortunately not where we're at in this country right now.
Right.
So Visceral pays 100% of health, vision, dental, disability, and life insurance for our team members, but also their family, which I'm extremely proud of. But that is extremely expensive as well. So that's an expense that we've taken on as a business because we feel it's the right thing to do. But it'd be easier if we had that extra money to do other things to grow the business. So we're constantly looking at how can we do the right things that we think benefit our team and benefit our community, but weighing the business cost of those kind of things, because it's hard to run a sort of good and ethical company, especially in a time where you see bigger companies like Amazon or Wells Fargo that are committing literal fraud or have unsafe business practices that don't care at all but succeed and make these outrageous amount of profits. So we're constantly having to and compete with other organizations too, other agencies that can undercut us and do work cheaper because they're not paying for their team to have healthcare benefits.
Right. Are the consequences just financial? Are there choices that you have to make that are beyond just it costs extra money?
That's a good question. I'd say money's the main thing, and especially looking at the types of projects that we take on too, the types of clients that we take on, working with the nonprofit community, like, they're not always as well funded as some of the corporate clients, so by choosing to work with a type of clients that are often underfunded, that also, makes it harder to do business. But other than the financial hit, I don't really see a lot of downside to it because most of the things that we do make us a better business. When you provide...
Say more about that. So why is that true?
Being a good business is good for business. And so the problem that a lot of companies have, and certainly in my industry, the agency world, is just turnover, right? It's people take a job, they'll work for 6 months to a year, maybe 18 months, and then they'll just go to a pivot to another agency doing the same type of work, but they do that to get a jump in a title or a pay bump, things like that. Where for us, we're sort of believers that it costs way more money to find good people than it does to just retain them. And so by taking care of our people, providing healthcare benefits and retirement, matching and stuff like that, those are just good things that our employees will benefit from. That also makes it easier for us to run our business because most of our team has been with us for 5-6 years, we've got 3-4 people on our team that have been with us for over a decade, which is extremely uncommon in our industry.
Wow.
And so it just makes it more of like a community-driven business where, people feel like they have an investment in the success of the company because the company is also invested in them.
So have you seen, I get the retention message, but are you seeing a generational shift in what employees want from companies like yours?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. B Corp puts out statistics every year, and right now, I think there's about a third of Americans that would say that they recognize what a B Corp is and they know, about the movement.
That's higher than I would have guessed.
Yeah, but it splits dramatically based on age. So
Okay.
if you're my age, anyone that's like over 40, it's only about 25%, and the older you get, if the baby boomer generation, it's only about like 16, 17%. Whereas anyone under 40, it's like, I think 52%. So the younger generation, they get it. They're almost demanding that the companies that they work for, the products that they buy, they see the world burning down around them and they want to be part of the solution. They want to work for better types of companies. They want to support small and local businesses. They want to get involved. And it's funny, there's this narrative that you hear a lot. And I'm from a small town back east. And when I go home, and end up with my mother and her, baby boomer friends, stuff like that, there's this phrase that always comes up. I'm sure you've heard it, which is, nobody wants to work anymore.
Yes, I have heard it. Right.
And that's, people have been saying that for 100 years,
Right,
and it wasn't
right.
true then. It's not true now.
Yeah, every generation gets
Every
tagged with
generation
that.
gets
Yeah.
that. And, I've had the great pleasure to speak at some of the universities here locally and to be part of the University of San Diego's social innovation internship program. And meeting these young people, they are incredibly ambitious, incredibly hardworking, and incredibly in touch in a way that my generation certainly was not. And, they recognize that, it's not that they don't want to work, they just want to be exploited for poverty wages as their,
Right.
Rent goes up 10% again year over year. And so it's, I do think there is a generational shift where people are seeing, that there is a movement, that there is something better, an alternative that they can work for or support.
So to put a finer point on that, I think if I were to ask you, do younger people choose Visceral because of its mission and B Corp status? Answer is probably yes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
One could also wonder, well, or are they choosing Visceral because you pay well,
provide benefits.
and you provide benefits?
Yeah.
And so when you're trying to assess that generational divide, is there a shift in what actually motivates them, or are the rules basically the rules that they've always been? This generation is just more aware of the possibility of being shortchanged.
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I'm certain that people would rather work for us because we do pay better wages and we have better benefits and a better company culture and all of that.
Yeah.
But based on my experiences with Gen Z, Gen Alpha, like they talk about things differently. They seem a lot more in touch with their values and and the community at large. And so I do think there is, certainly like higher wages is something everyone wants, but I do think there is something that they're looking for, where they want to be part of a movement that is helping, that is fixing problems instead of creating them.
Do you think? Well, I want to ask you about the context of that movement in San Diego,
Sure.
But let me first continue to drill down on your experience as a business owner in this space. You used the term a moment ago about, you were talking about interns or fellows, I think, working in the social innovation space.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that notion of social innovation, which is helping to innovate or create new models in the civic arena and with respect to society, how does that connect with business, with B Corps and business for good?
I mean, those are the people that we eventually want working for our companies, or eventually.
And why? What is their skill set that makes you?
I don't think it's about the skill set. I think, whatever it is that you do, whether you do what I do, like, tech work, making websites and that kind of thing, or whether we're in San Diego, whether you make burritos, right? Like, if you work in a restaurant, like, there's the skill set, but there's also this notion of why you do it, and if you care enough. And I think this social innovation internship program, and again, the younger generation, they have so much larger of an appetite for being involved in something that feels progressive and feels like impactful. And it's hard to even quantify, really. Just talking with some of these younger people, it's just you get a sense from them that they just have a bigger picture in mind that certainly my generation didn't have. Like when I came out of college, we didn't really. It's not that we didn't care, but it wasn't an option really. You either kind of worked for a nonprofit, which you can help and save the world, or you took a corporate job where you could make money. There was no sort of in between path, which I think that's what this space that social innovation, social entrepreneurship is filling, where it's it's okay to make money. You can have a good quality of life. You can be an entrepreneur, but you can also give back and you can be part of something that's greater. And the fact that there are now programs at universities like USD and UCSD that are teaching these students that and opening that door for them, I think is incredible, because none of that existed when I was in school.
So when you're thinking about the folks who are drawn to that, I think for a long time when we talked about this movement, it wasn't even seen as a movement. It was seen as a niche.
Yeah.
And there was always a subset of people who were motivated by wanting to do well, but also do good. And fundamentally, that's what this is.
Right.
What do you think is beginning to change that now it's beginning to be more? Why are people talking about it as a movement as opposed to just a niche?
I think part of it is that the world feels tougher now. You pick your issue, whether it's racial justice or gender equity or income inequality, the climate. It feels like we have more problems now, or maybe the problems were more visible. The internet sort of just laid bare everything. We're constantly inundated by all of these stories, and a lot of them are not good. But I think there's also it's getting more press and more visibility just because it has grown.
Yeah.
10 years ago when we got our B Corp certification, there were less than 2,000 B Corps worldwide, and only about a dozen here in San Diego. And now there's over 10,000 worldwide, and I think we got about 50 in San Diego with a goal of doubling that in by the end of next year. And so it's more visible because just over time people have kind of bought into it,
right?
And it's we're hopeful that it's hitting that sort of exponential curve where we're just going to see more and more of that.
Yeah. So for a company like yours, how do you measure success beyond revenue? If I'm a public company, I've got quarterly earnings reports that I have to file, and the only thing that matters is that I'm growing 30% every year. So that's not the game you're playing. So how are you measuring success?
So we have a company dashboard, which is all of our team has access to, and it has a bunch of financial metrics. We're a big believer in transparency. And we have what we call a give back metric, which essentially measures all the money we spend that we don't have to spend. And so that includes things like donations, which sometimes we do as a business. We also have a donation matching policy. So if our team members want to donate to a cause they care about, we'll match it. We do some sponsorships of organizations like Business for Good and ComNet, things like that. But it also includes things like healthcare. It includes we have what's called a profit pool. So at the end of the year, if this role makes money and we have profit left over, some of it goes into a cash reserves account, rainy day fund, smart business practices, but about half of it gets distributed back to our team. Our success isn't measured by how rich you make me; it's how well our team does. And to piggyback on that, I'm going to paraphrase a quote that I apologize. I don't know who said it, but the best thing I've ever heard about company culture was that a company's success is measured by how their employees feel on Sunday night. Right.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
And I have no delusions that my team is, hooray, we can't wait to get to work in the morning. But I know what it's like to have that sort of existential dread that sets in after dinner on Sunday. We're like, oh my God,
the Sunday scaries.
The Sunday scaries, exactly. And I think, you can, it's hard to quantify that. We can't put that in a spreadsheet, but there's definitely a feeling, or a vibe, as the kids say, on how your team is responding when they show up on Monday morning for staff meetings and things like that. And so that's the thing that we look at. Our goal, how we measure success is, how our team feels. Do they like the work that they're doing? Or do they feel supported? When they, we had a couple of team members that have had children recently. And so allowing them to work remotely and take time off, to care for their kids and whatnot. It's we're big believers that as long as you get your work done, doesn't matter if you do it from 8 to 5 or, if you want to take a couple hours because you got to take care of your kid and you want to work later, whatever, like we're all adults here, like, when your client meetings are, when your deliverables are, as long as you're getting the work done, like we're not here to micromanage everyone. Like, our success is dependent on our team feeling comfortable in their ability to get the work done and feeling supported in that endeavor.
It's funny. I'm having a flashback. I briefly left the philanthropy world to go succeed the outgoing head of an ad agency that had the same aspirations around mission, but none of the practices that you're describing. So yeah, it was wildly different. I wish I'd had you as a boss. But I'm curious what happens in your culture when you're not living up to what people expect, and because you're setting high expectations.
Sure.
And let's say you're falling short on the donations that you're making or some other metric that you're using. What do you hear from your team?
We've tried to build the company around transparency. Again, so we have, like I mentioned, a financial dashboard. So, it's my literal nightmare to have to wake up one day and be like, hey, Travis or Dana, like one of my team members will be like, hey, we don't have a job for you anymore. We have to lay you off. Right. So we look at like our financial metrics like on a weekly basis, and it's all public so that anyone from our team can see that. So if we are falling short, and right now, to be candid with you, it's a tough time for agencies that work with nonprofits. It's a real tough time for nonprofits right now.
It is. Yeah.
And so, the way we, sort of deal with that is just being open and honest and transparent about where we are and why we're there and, and what we're trying to change to hit our metrics, but also opening the door for, like, I don't know everything. Like, you shouldn't just listen to me. If anyone on my team has an idea of something that we could do or change that would make our work better, create better relationships with our clients, make their jobs easier, like, we're always looking for those kind of ideas. And we want our team to feel that, that's just, we're a team, right? Like, they're not employees, like, they're team members. Like, they have as much say in the success of our business as I do.
So, I'm thinking about this, where we are now. We've got a movement, as we're talking about it. This business for good idea has grown into more of a movement. There's more interest in it. More companies nationally forming around the B Corp certification. You were just mentioning that. And we've got a generation or two generations that are expressing interest in working for these sort of companies. And it's a flat out better place to work from what you're describing. So a lot driving potential momentum around a different way of doing capitalism, doing business. And that's reflected somewhat in San Diego, where I think you said we went from 10 to 50 B Corp certified companies.
Correct. In about 10 years, and we're looking to just fully accelerate that.
All right. So quintupled it in a relatively, in just a decade. That's big. And, I know Dr. Paula Cordero, who's on our board and who is headlining the Business for Good conference that is coming up, believes, and I believe that San Diego has some, because we've got this momentum, we've got some advantages to make this part of our character in San Diego. Mm-hmm. Is that true in your experience, that San Diego is in a position to distinguish itself as a place where this is happening? I
think so. I hope so.
Yeah.
If you look at the B Corp movement around the world, there are a handful of cities that are sort of leading the charge, right?
Yeah.
Like New York, San Francisco, LA, but also like London. London has over 1,000 B corporations.
So they're a little ahead of us.
A little bit ahead of us. Yeah. So we've got some catching.
Bigger city.
We've got some catching up to do, but I do think. So I've been here for 15 years, and when I moved to San Diego, it had this sort of sleepy beach town feel to it, which I think it still has. It's part of the charm of San Diego that even as a big city, it still feels very close knit and whatnot. But in the last even just 5 to 6 years, I think I've seen just a real acceleration of this idea that business can be a force for good with Cause San Diego, with Business for Good, with Be Local, and all these organizations, with the work that Paul is doing. And so I do think that we're well positioned for it. And right now, what I think is that I'm seeing we're sort of building the infrastructure for that to happen. So as I mentioned before, like B Corp is, it's great. I love it, but it's a rigorous certification process. And so one of the things that we're doing, there's a local organization called B School, which is designed to make it easier and like sort of lower the bar for like how organizations, businesses can get information about B Corp, can sort of get their hand held through the B Corp certification process. And I think the more we can build the infrastructure to make it easier and accessible for organizations that already share those values to be able to go through the certification, and I think we can really accelerate the amount of people we have in the movement. And I think San Diego can be one of those A-tier cities where I'd love
you do.
for us. Yeah, I think.
And what would it take for us to get there? What are we going to have to do to go from 50 to 1,000 or whatever is our equivalent?
Yeah, I think it's just going to take work. I think that the challenge is that there's not always funding for these kind of things. And so I think education is one of the biggest things that we can do. Like what we're doing right now, the more people know about the B Corp movement, the more people learn to look for that logo when they're at the grocery store and whatnot. And, the more people will start to support those organizations and start to demand those organizations. And when consumers start making better choices, then business sort of falls in line, right? So if it becomes profitable to run a B Corp, if it becomes more advantageous, then some of these organizations are going to fall in line because that's just the new normal now. And so I do think we're on the right path. It's going to take some time and some work, but I'm constantly hopeful because of people like Paula Cordero, because of people like Abraham Chen, who's the board chair of Be Local here in San Diego, who is just one of the nicest people you'll ever meet, but also just a fierce advocate. And, is it 3 or 4 events every week, just, talking to people and sort of extolling the virtues of what the movement is and can be, and, trying to just rallying the troops and getting people involved, and just kind of shining a light on the work that's already happening here as well.
So, what do you think? Well, actually, I want to ask you about how you see the broader movement, because you've been through a very rigorous credentialing, which you've described for us, and you emerge with this B Corp certification. But the field of purpose-driven enterprise is broader than that. The way people talk about it, other forms that get included could be co-ops.
Absolutely.
It could be employee, companies that really lean into employee ownership.
Right, like an ESOP.
And start thinking about building generational wealth. But they may not be B Corp certified. And so as somebody who has that credential, do you see yourself as part of this broader movement? Or do you think they all ought to become B Corps?
That's a great question. I think part of the broader movement.
I want to know if you're a purist or not.
I'm absolutely not. No, honestly, I think as much I'm a huge supporter of the B Corp movement. I think it's been obvious here.
Yeah.
But I also think B Corp is
that might show.
But that's almost like the floor, right? Like we'd love to get people up to the B Corp movement, but we'd also we'd love more employee stock ownership plans, more co-ops. More. I listened to the Paula's podcast that she did with you talking about Mondragon in Spain, right? B Corp is great, but it is not the end all be all. If we can get people to hear and then talk even broader about what else can we build? How can we make this even better? I think I'm a big believer in the broader movement, and that B Corp is just it's kind of a nice, easy start because there's a process to it. There's a formula for it. And because there now are 10,000 B Corps worldwide and it's gaining this momentum, that it becomes easier for people to sort of just use that as an on-ramp, and then hopefully to continue the process. Just because we got our B Corp certification doesn't mean that we stop there. We're always looking for ways where, how can we be better next time we have to recertify, or what else can we do as a business? So I do appreciate that there is a broader movement outside of just B Corp.
So I was thinking about your thank you for that, because I think that is an answer that suggests that with multiple doors into this process, that you're going to have more success in building the movement that you're describing.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking about then the infrastructure that supports it, and you used this term earlier, talking about the infrastructure that supports it, and we have certainly Paula has been part of that as a professor at the University of San Diego and former dean. And we have Business for Good, and we have Be Local. You mentioned Abraham. But it's largely been volunteer driven and volunteer led. How sustainable a model is that?
My gut says that it's not. My gut says that we need more infrastructure. We need more people in paid positions. That is their livelihood, is to support and grow this movement. Again, when we're talking about profit versus greed and things like that, money's not the enemy here. So if there's funding and if we're creating jobs, to sort of accelerate this movement, like I would love to see more of that. I would love to see more people getting paid and creating their whole livelihood, their whole career around growing this movement. And I think in order for it to be more sustainable, I think some of that's going to need to happen.
Yeah. So, you've answered one part of my next question, which, was about the role you think philanthropy can play in helping to sustain this movement. So, leaning into that in terms of enabling there to be a more sustainable model for the infrastructure piece sounds like that's important here. But as you think at a more granular level, is there a role for local philanthropy to play in making the movement more relevant for local purpose-driven businesses?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So I think I would love to see more. I'd love to see more grants for social entrepreneurship, social innovation, right? I mean, not to make it totally financial, but I'll give you a practical example. So about a year and a half ago, some friends and I started a second company because we just apparently hate free time. And we're doing a social enterprise apparel company, and we've already got our B Corp certification. We're trying to build this company from the ground up, to be the type of organization that gives back. So basically, the quick pitch is we pair upcoming artists with a nonprofit organization. We design cool T-shirts and hoodies and whatnot because we live in Southern California. And then for every product we sell, we donate 50% of the profits back to the artist and to the nonprofit. So trying to use it as a fundraising tool to sort of direct money into causes we care about.
Yeah. Fantastic.
People like the model, and we've been doing this for a little while, and we sold some shirts and whatnot. But like, in order for a business to succeed, we need funding for it, right? And for any kind of social enterprise, your options are you can self-finance it, which we're doing now, but like we're not rich. I don't have millions of dollars to funnel into it.
Yeah.
You can take on investors, but no investor is going to like the idea that we're giving half
You're
our
giving
profits
away
back.
Right.
And so, or you can take out a loan, and so that's probably the route that we're going to take. But I would love for foundations who typically give grants to nonprofits to also consider social entrepreneurs, because there are a lot of people that are coming out of universities like USD and UCSD here that have way better ideas than what I just described to you. And, for them to be able to get those ideas off the ground and turn those into, sustainable companies that then finance some sort of cause that they care about, I think that's a really great model for making social change. So I'd love to see that from a philanthropic standpoint. And then like what we said earlier too, just education. The more that we need to get the word out to young people that there are different economic opportunities, that you can have like a really great career and a high-paying job that also does something good and gives back, as well as to consumers, to let them know that there are better choices. Because if we all just keep ordering trash from Amazon, like that's the world that we're going to create. Right. But if we can support small businesses and local businesses and B Corps and organizations that are part of this broader movement, we can essentially make positive change that way.
Yeah. I love your model, by the way. Anything that enlists artists in the way that you're describing sounds great. So,
well, thank you. We're pretty excited about it. We're still very early on.
So when you're talking with young people about, or anybody about the this whole enterprise in a San Diego context, aside from your own company, what's your favorite example?
Here locally?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's a good question. I've got to give you a couple.
Yeah.
So based on the work that I do, we now have a partner network. And so I have a B Corp lawyer, Better APC, Sam Mazzio here in town. Most people are like, lawyers, but like Sam's one of the nicest and smartest people I've ever met that is dedicated his career to helping nonprofits and small businesses, through their the legal work that he does. Uplift Accounting, my accountant here in San Diego.
I would not have expected you to start with a lawyer and an accountant.
But those are the things that every business needs. But we're like, we hate those. But like, I have people that are kind and smart, and that I trust, and not to rip me off, to give me good, solid advice. So those two specifically, Lotus Sustainables, I think is really great. Good friend of mine here in San Diego, but they're on a mission to, make anytime you go get your groceries or go to Target, or whatever, to have reusable bags and whatnot, because we're in California, so we're a little bit anti-plastic bag, whatever, but most places are not. And so there's a lot of waste that comes from just going to the store and getting your groceries, or going to the store to buy some toys for your kids and whatnot. So if we could all, have just a better system for that, that's just, part of this B Corp movement, it sounds so grandiose, like we're going to change the world, but a lot of it is just little minor things like that, where if you just change your habit a little bit, or buy a slightly better product, or buy the same product from a company that's doing it better. So locally, Dr. Bronner's, also, like, you just buy your soap and your toothpaste, but you buy it from a company that has great values and has an ethical supply chain, things like that. It's just a better version of something that you're already doing.
Do you find that you do consciously buy from these companies?
Absolutely.
In your personal life? I'll
be perfectly transparent. Like, sometimes you just have to order from Amazon because it's quick and easy, and but to the extent that we're able to make conscious choices, like we try to support local, we try to support small businesses in our community, or if we're going to, buy like a big ticket product, we try to support B Corps when we can. So I'll give you a practical example. This is super fun. I'm very much enjoying this, but I'm an introvert at heart. So at home, like, I'm going to go home after this and I'm going to make a cocktail. And I'm going to use Maker's Mark Bourbon because they are the world's largest B Corp certified distillery.
I didn't know they were.
And they spend a ton of money to make sure that all of their farming practices for the grains that go into their bourbon are, they're big on regenerative agriculture, as well as paying, given the region that they're in, like substantially higher wages to their team and stuff like that. And so, again, like, whatever product or service that you use, if you can buy the B Corp version of it, or the business for good version of it, it's just, those are small choices that you can make that a lot of them don't even materially affect your life. You're just trading one product for another, but you're supporting the kind of world that we want to build.
I love that example, by the way. And I also love that you're an introvert, which so many of us in outward-facing jobs are.
Yeah.
And I don't drink, but I applaud your way of recovering. So, there's a question that, as we've been talking, keeps coming up for me, and it's I could ask it about any business leader. It feels especially relevant given your values and your focus on wanting to do good in the world. So part of what we're living through, aside from a crazy period of political disruption and division in the country and all the things that we talk about, there's also AI, and it's rapidly changing business, yours included.
Absolutely.
And so how do you, as a B Corp, think about AI in the context of your work and its implications for personnel and how the work gets done and the values of what you articulate? And so how are you processing that?
With Maker's Mark Bourbon. No, it's a fantastic question, because AI is the topic of like most of the conversations I'm having these days, because it is upending everything. And as a business that works in the technology space, we don't want to be left behind. But at the same time, a lot of what AI is doing from an ethical standpoint, we don't agree with. So a couple of sort of practical examples. AI can do a lot of things really, really well, and a lot of things poorly. And so in our business, we use it for some things, like we use it for research. It can write really good code. And for us, the code we write is all based on platforms that are called open source. So that's free and easily distributed. And so the AI is not stealing someone's intellectual property or anything like that. But for design work, like logos and website design, stuff like that, we don't use it for that, because the way that generative AI works is being trained on someone else's intellectual property. So if you have AI crank out a logo, you might end up with a lawsuit because it inadvertently stole someone else's property. And so it's a very complex question. And what I would say is that we need more AI companies that are part of this movement, right? And so if you look at what's happening right now this week, the Department of War, as we're now calling it, has issued sort of an ultimatum to Anthropic, which
Right.
is an AI company that makes Claude AI. And whereas Gemini and Lambda and ChatGPT, they've also fallen in line with this administration that basically says, you can use AI for whatever it is that you want to do. And Anthropic is currently, as of taping this podcast, sort of holding the line on you can use our AI, but you can't use it to conduct mass surveillance on U.S. citizens, and you can't use it for autonomous weapons systems. And so they're drawing a line in the sand around ethics and morals, which is good, and we need more of that. And Anthropic is actually a public benefit corporation. And so the distinction being that public benefit corporations exist to serve the public good. They haven't been through the B Corp certification process yet. We hope that they will, but we need more companies like that are thinking about AI and as a technology that will reshape humanity.
Interesting.
But with ethics and morals and values at the forefront, and not just profit.
Fascinating. Do you know if Anthropic has a desire to become B Corp certified, or?
Not that I've seen them publicly state,
Yeah.
but I think that the fact that they are a public benefit corporation, and the fact that they are the only ones right now that are sort of trying to inject morals and values into this, not even national, worldwide conversation we're having about AI, gives me a little bit of hope.
Well, and I, just to bring it closer to home, I think that's a fascinating example. And then to bring it closer to home, the principles that you've laid out in your own business about where you will use it and where you won't seems to be like a really well thought out way of processing this shift that's coming. Since people are so important, does your team worry about it? Like, what happens to my job in this?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're having conversations about that on a weekly basis, because our goal, like I said earlier, like I love my team. They're some of the smartest, kindest people I've ever met, and I very much want to keep them employed and make sure that they continue to get raises and bonuses, and they're able to support their families and stuff like that. And like, we would never replace anyone with AI, but that is definitely happening all across the country. And so for our industry as well, can an AI do what I do? And like, kind of, yeah. So it's a tough conversation we're having, and I do think there's going to be.
The issue isn't really whether you would replace an employee, although it is that,
right?
But it's also whether a client would replace you,
right? Absolutely,
and the agency with AI,
right? With you as a foundation, would you choose to hire an agency that is half the cost of what we would charge because they're leveraging AI?
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same conversation we've been having for years about outsourced labor and things like that, and I'm hopeful, given the type of clients that we work with, that they've told, many of them have told us specifically that they hired us because we're a B corporation, because we've clearly demonstrated that we share their values, and they want to work with people and support people that, that are part of the same community, part of the same team, and they don't want just to outsource it overseas or outsource it to AI. And so I'm hopeful that there will be not a backlash so much, but like just a more thoughtful approach to how we can use this new technology, because there's some amazing benefits to AI too. Like you can use it to make protein folding for cancer research and stuff like that. There's some amazing things that AI can do, but there's also a lot of crap, or slop as it's called, that's being generated at great expense, in terms of electricity usage and water usage and whatnot. And like that's an issue that I think we're going to have to reckon with.
I heard an artist say once that, hey, I wanted AI to like vacuum my house. And make my life easier, not do my art, and I think we're forgetting that part of the intention originally was supposed to be to help us lean more into our humanness, and
absolutely.
Well, I appreciate first of all the intentional way in which you're wrestling with that, and second of all your candor about it, which is refreshing. So do you think when you look out 10 years from now, what does success look like for you as a company? I mean, you're still around, your team is still there, but what does success look like for this movement and for you?
It's hard to say on one hand, because I mean, we don't know what I work on the internet, and we don't know what the internet's going to look like in 10 years. AI is going to change everything.
Yeah.
But, what does success look like for us? It's the same thing that's looked like 10 years ago, 20 years ago. We're a lifestyle company. We exist for the benefit of the people on our team. So if at the end of the day we're still doing work that we love in whatever weird new AI generated form that takes, with people that we enjoy working with, and on behalf of organizations that are still fighting the good fight, because that's currently Visceral's mission is, we work exclusively with organizations focused on positive social change. So we can work with a B Corp, we work with a nonprofit or a foundation. We don't really care as long as you're doing something good and positive in the world. So if we're still doing that kind of work, I will view that as a success. That's all we've ever wanted, is to be able to, have a job that we like with people that we like and do something that we think is productive and adds value. Yeah. And for the broader movement, I hope that we continue to see this exponential acceleration. I hope in 10 years, San Diego has 1,000 B Corps. I hope we have 2,000. I hope we outpace London. I hope B Corp or ESOPs or co-ops or whatever the sort of for good business movement. I hope that becomes the norm. And that's just that the bar becomes so low. Like that's the bare minimum. Like everyone has to do that. And I'd love to see policy and legislation that pushes us towards making that a requirement or provides tax incentives and for those type of businesses, et cetera, et cetera. But I would love to see the movement continue to grow in a way where it's just the standard way of doing business.
And do you think, and I think with this we'll wrap up, but do you think that, trends are hard to predict, as you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think a few years ago, if I had been asked to forecast, I would have gone with what I heard from forecasters globally about future energy usage, which was trending down across the world, and then crypto, and then AI, and so now energy usage globally is off the charts, and the future looks like that's how it's going to be, as far as we can see. So, something that people like me worked on for a long time to try and get conservation to take care of our energy challenges, turns out maybe not so. It didn't pan out the way we expected. Does this movement of doing business for good survive because the underlying trends are so necessary and important? Or do you see it being undone by AI and the forces of traditional business?
So I am a cautious optimist. And so I do think that the movement will continue, and I do think that the movement will win out of sheer necessity. Because if it doesn't, I don't, I grew up reading sci-fi novels and stuff like that. I don't want to live in a dystopia, from AI or from, the lack of resources because AI and crypto have siphoned all of our water and, destroyed all of our forests and stuff like that. So I think there is a necessity to it. I think that some of it, I hope, will spur conversations around like, okay, well, AI needs energy, right? We need for these data centers and some legitimate uses of AI. Well, how can we have a conversation around, solar panels and wind and geothermal energy? How can we recreate America's energy infrastructure to support the good uses of AI and use AI as a tool that makes, that benefits humanity, that helps us solve some of the problems that we're currently having? And so that is my sincerest hope. And
I love that answer. In a way, I was asking you a trick question because the energy equation, what I said was true, but it is also true that even in the face of the trends that we're seeing today and massively contrarian U.S. policy, global growth in sustainable energy sources is still extraordinary. And
absolutely, and it's sad that we're being outpaced by everyone else.
We're losing the race as a country, but the trends are very clear that we're reinventing the way we do energy. So I love your answer. Where you're seeing a future in which a movement like Business for Good is still absolutely vital, no matter what the shorter term challenges are, including AI. I hope you're right.
I hope I'm right too. I think there's a lot of bad news out there right now, and if you open your phone, that's kind of all you see. But there are so many good things happening too, and that's why I appreciate having conversations like this, because there is a better path forward. There's a lot of positive change that's happening, and it feels like doom and gloom a lot. I totally get that, and I succumb to that sometimes. But being part of this movement is one of the things that gives me hope. And, I'm excited to be part of it. I'm excited to have conversations with people like you that are, that are bringing it to a wider audience.
Mm. Well, I'm going to wrap up by just saying thank you for not just the work you're doing, which I admire, but also the fact that you are that you do lean in so energetically to talking to other people and educating them and making this part of how you present to the world, because I do think San Diego has this opportunity to be a leader in a new way of thinking about how we create workplaces that are good for people and how we create businesses that are good for people. So very grateful for the work you're doing, and thanks for being on the program.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute honor, and I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, likewise. Okay, just for the record, this is not Maker's Mark. We've mentioned that so many times it feels like a free spot.
Well, that was like one of my key takeaways is I can drink Maker's Mark with less guilt. I love it. Yay for regenerative farming.
All right. Well, let's think about why this was important. I think this conversation captures a big trend that is happening in American society, driven partly by changing mores and how people relate to work, and partly by a new generation asking different questions about the type of companies that they want to work with. And I think what was really interesting about how Jay talks about this is there really is this possibility for San Diego to be a leader in that. You could think about the difference between us and London, and we have 50 B Corps and London has 1,000, but we've quintupled the number in a decade. And I don't know, it just, given the ones that are here, we have a real advantage to lean into.
Yeah, I think because we care so much about the environment here, we benefit from it nearly 365 days a year. I think tying to, he even mentioned his company as a lifestyle company, which it was not a term I was familiar with, but the idea of working well, enjoying your life, who you work with, also seems like a benefit on this B Corp. Even though there are trade-offs, it seems like a great kind of place to want to work.
Yeah. I mean, when you think about why people choose the work that they do, I do know a lot of folks, particularly younger people, who are looking to do work that is meaningful and feels purposeful, and they also want to do well while they're doing it. They want it to pay the bills, but they want to feel like they're part of something. I just wonder, when you think about it from a San Diego perspective, what do you think we have here that we can really lean into?
In terms of the business model itself? I think we have these life sciences, we have arts and culture. So I think these are spaces that are already about joy and culture and love. And so then to add a B Corp layer, like we do this responsively so that the future's better, I think there's probably a feel-good sense there. But I also think if we can show the rest of the world that the bottom line is a triple bottom line.
Right.
I think that's just good all the way around. Our kids can be proud of us, which matters. But I also think, even though we know it's not about the marketing, there is a brand or a reputation we could build around this that might be attractive
for San Diego.
Yeah, and might make more people want to come work here.
Right. Yeah. Well, I was really struck by Jay's thoughts at the end and the exchange that we had around them, that even in a time when the stories are often so negative and it seems so difficult, that there are still underlying trends about people wanting to do good and be part of a different way of doing business. And I find that exciting. I also think it's an important thing for San Diego to lean into, precisely because of what you said, our natural assets, our interest in cohesion and community. It matters here, and therefore we can capitalize on those trends.
Yeah, and I think when you and Jay discussed the future workforce, right? Those who are coming into the workforce, they have new expectations for employers.
Right.
So if we get this right, I think it's good for the workforce. It's probably good for our quality of life and balance. So I think there's so much opportunity there if we can just get it going.
That is a great place to end.
Yeah.
And, for San Diego, I think we should really be leaning into this opportunity around the type of work and business we want to create for the future in this community and be known for.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Great chatting
Yeah.
with you.
Likewise.
Stop. Talk to me.